Welcome to the morning show. We're coming to you today on Channel 9, on WJOP-LP Newburyport at FM 96.3, and also Newburyport Community Media's YouTube channel at ncmhub.org. I'm your host, Mary Jacobsen, and I'm just delighted to welcome back Dan Lipcan. He is the Ann-C. Pingree Director of the Phillips Library at Peabody Essex Museum in Salem. And he's here to talk to us about PEM's exciting new exhibit called Let None Be Excluded, the origins of equal school rights in Salem, which he co-curated along with Newburyport's own Dr. Kabria Baumgartner, who's the Dean's Associate Professor of History and Africana Studies at Northeastern University. Welcome, and thank you so much, Dan, for taking time to visit the morning show to talk about this exhibit.
You're very welcome, Mary. It's good to be with you again.
Absolutely. Well, Dan, let's start in the beginning. This exhibit tells the fascinating story of equal school rights in Salem. Many people may be surprised, as I initially was, to learn that actually in the beginning of the 19th century, Salem schools were integrated until they became segregated in 1834, and then until they became reintegrated about 10 years later. Thanks to the efforts of some courageous and strategic young Black activists that you're going to teach us about today. But first, Dan, please tell us how Salem schools came to be integrated in the early part of the 19th century, and how unusual was this in the United States at the time?
Sure, be glad to. And I think I should probably preface that by saying, this exhibition would not have happened without the research and the work of Dr. Baumgartner. I met her when she was a Malamy Fellow at the Phillips Library. We have an annual fellowship, and she was working on the Black history of Essex County and Salem. And she discovered this petition by Robert Morris, who we'll talk about a little bit later. She wrote a fascinating book called In Pursuit of Knowledge. And it just worked out that, this was kind of that project was the germ of this exhibition. And it was really great to work with her on this. I've learned a lot. And I hope our visitors do too. So what's really interesting is that, what we know is that in the early 19th century, there were not hard and fast rules for segregation at Salem. Like it wasn't a thing. There was some segregation that existed in churches. So for example, some may have had specific pews that were for Black congregants. And there was a kind of a de facto segregation based on geography and wealth. We know that there was a neighborhood in Salem, variously known as Palmer's Hill, or perhaps pejoratively Roast Meat Hill. And this is where the African school was, where Chloe Minns, later known as Clarissa Lawrence, taught. But we do, in the exhibition, we do have an 1824 class list from a school in Central Salem that shows 4 Black kids integrated with others. And so, what that tells us is that there was some integration in the schools in the 19th century, which frankly was surprising to me. I didn't think that was something that had happened. And so I think it was more of an artifact of geography. Kids went to the schools that were in their areas or in their neighborhoods at the time. And what we see is that, over the next decade, an effort to effectively establish segregation, intentional segregation, took place, culminating in the 1834 decision by the Salem School Committee.
Well, that's really interesting, Dan. So it sounds as though it was a convergence of just where people happened to be living. And there wasn't anything that explicitly forbade, integration in the schools. And so it actually was integrated until 1834, right. And then things changed. So tell us now, what was it that happened in 1834 that changed that equation, and who was responsible for that, and what arguments did they present to support segregating schools?
So I think one of the first momentous occurrences that happened was 1830, when Sarah Ramond and her sisters were expelled from the East School for Girls. Sarah was 10 years old at the time. And frankly, the Ramonds were excellent students. That this is a renowned family in Salem history, and they were great students, and this was threatening to the white community, frankly. And so what we see over the course of 1828 to about 1834 is the white some of the white community members in Salem start to build these arguments for creating a separate school for Black children. They ask the town lawyer, Leverett Saltonstall, who later became the first mayor of Salem, to issue some opinions on whether or not separate schools could be created for Black kids. And he issues two opinions, both in support of what would become known as a separate but equal doctrine. And this is, as far as we know, this is one of the earliest conceptions of that doctrine, which is actually kind of an exciting discovery historically. You know, we see this argument resonate for another 100 and something years, right?
Yeah.
All the way up through Brown versus Board of Education, and we're still talking about this today.
Yes, we are.
So what ended up happening is that in 1834, a petition was submitted to the Salem School Committee. It was signed by 176 residents of Salem, asking the school committee to establish a separate school for Black children, and they voted and did so. There isn't really a reason included in this petition. You know, there's some vague language about, the emotional well-being of children and that sort of thing, but there's nothing really concrete there, which leads us to believe that, the performance of students like Sarah Rahman and her sisters was threatening.
Yeah, well, that's an old story. A sad story, yes, but a very old story. And so some of the parents got upset about that, submitted a petition, and because they asked, it was granted without a whole lot of attempt, even, it sounds like, to justify it. Well, Dan, so how was the Black community impacted by this decision, and how did they respond to it?
Well, I mean, they didn't like it, first of all. It was certainly an inconvenience to many of them who, if you're able to go to the local school in one part of town, now suddenly you have to walk miles to attend this segregated school that has been set up for your children or for you. And all of the Black kids in school were concentrated into essentially one schoolroom that was within the central school at the intersection of what is now Bridge and Washington Street. And, everybody was there in one room. There were up to 60 kids at one time. So I'm sure it was complete chaos, not really a great learning environment, right? But the city gave the so-called African school the best teacher in the city. His name was William Dodge. And he actually was very fair and an excellent teacher. His daughter they kind of established a primary department, which was kind of for the younger kids, and his daughter ran that portion of the classroom. And Robert Morris, who we feature in the exhibition a little bit, mentions that Dodge was fair and an excellent teacher. So to a certain extent, the town had extended this olive branch to the Black community. So what happens is once Dodge decides to move west to Ohio, his successor is not a very good teacher. And that's really when stuff starts to kick off and Black parents and community members start to agitate for a change to this practice of segregated schooling.
Well, and part of what's fascinating about the story is the engagement of young Black activists, whose stories, as you've indicated, are highlighted, I know, in the exhibit. And I was hoping that you could tell us a little bit more, particularly about two of those young activists. Who were they? What motivated them to fight for, let's call it, knowledge equality? And what arguments and strategies did they employ? You mentioned both of them already, but let's start with Sarah Parker Remond, and then move on to Robert Morris.
Sure. Well, I mean, Sarah was a member, as I've mentioned, she was a member of the prominent Remond family. They were an activist family, all involved in abolition movements, later on women's suffrage advocacy. And she, in her autobiography, she wrote a really searing essay about her expulsion from school at 10 years old. And ultimately, in the aftermath of that, the Remonds moved down to Newport because they thought they would be able to actually, get some knowledge equality down there, which turned out not quite to be the case. but she also helped the movement in the state progress. You know, she signed the 1855 Massachusetts state petition for equal school rights that eventually did pass, and Massachusetts was the first state in the Union to abolish segregated schools. So she had a significant hand in what happened in Salem. And Robert Morris was also a Salem native, and his part was that he wrote equal school rights petitions to the Salem and the Boston school committees. I mentioned Kabria's discovery of this one Morris petition that was heretofore unknown. And this was written when he was about 19 years old. He was a lawyer in training at that point in Boston. And he really lays out this kind of six-pointed argument for why segregated schools should be abolished. And it's kind of this combination of legal reasoning and economics and economic feasibility, and just kind of this heartfelt plea to the Salem School Committee to say, these are all the reasons why segregated schools should not exist. And Morris came to this work, I think, in large part because of some of the literary societies that had been run by Black elders like William Cooper Nell, who we mentioned in the exhibition. These places were gatherings of folks who could listen to lectures, read, discuss, initiatives and other ways in taking direct action against things like segregation. So through petitioning, through protesting, through boycotting, and these were the mechanisms that these Black activists really preferred: direct actions instead of, just letting education and voting take their course. Well,
they both sound like extraordinary young people, and really inspirational role models for young people, timeless role models for young people of any age and time. And certainly we're going to need a lot of them now. I mean, we always do, but it just feels like it's an acute need right now. And so to me, it sounds as though they provide really extraordinary, inspiring role models for youth activism and the impact that it can have. So what was the result of their activism, Dan, and how will you describe their continuing legacy today in Salem and in Massachusetts?
Well, so Morris submitted his petition to the Salem School Committee in January of 1844. It was debated and supported by Stephen Clarendon Phillips, in particular, who kind of gathered the support within the Salem School Committee to hold the vote and abolish segregated schools, which happened on March 23rd, 1844. And we were fortunate to borrow the Salem School Committee record book from the city that contains the minutes of that meeting, whereby those resolutions were listed and then the vote was taken. So we're very glad to have that in the exhibition. It's a remarkable document, and the city clerk has amazing penmanship. So it's
so you can read it, in other words.
You can read it for sure. Yeah. So that was, Salem was among the first, if not the first municipality in the country to abolish segregated schools, and the first to do so permanently. And we see that happen in Massachusetts in 1855. There was an effort to gather signatures for a petition to abolish classifying schools by race and religion. That was passed then. And we see, as I mentioned, we see these arguments resonate for over 100 years in cases like Brown versus Board of Education, Plessy versus Ferguson, and closer to the time period, Roberts versus City of Boston, which was kind of a local equal school rights case decided in 1849 in support of segregation. But it did galvanize the efforts to push for the change that happened in 1855. So what's their legacy? I mean, Redmond and Morris were central to the fight for equity and equal school rights. And they really were leaders as essentially young people, which is remarkable. And it's kind of amazing to think that the things that they were after 150, 200 years ago are still unresolved and still unaccomplished. And we, as you mentioned, we still have work to do.
Yeah, but it's inspiring and heartening to find out. I mean, these tensions, this tug of war, it's somehow essentially part of our American history. But it's inspiring and exciting to hear that they fought hard and they fought smart and they succeeded, because it proves that there may always be pendulum swings, but it proves that, that you can win.
Right. Right.
If you fight hard and you're impassioned and you fight smart and you don't give up. And so that to me seems like one of the significant kind of lessons that these two young people you're describing leave for the rest of us to pick up on and continue to fight hard and smart. And do you know what happened to them in later life? Because they were both very young when this chapter in their lives took place.
Yeah, I mean, Sarah Remond lectured widely throughout the United States and in England. She left in the late 1850s for England. And she was really an international activist for human rights and for women's suffrage in particular. She later went to Italy in the late 1860s to Florence, and she pursued medical training, became a physician, and practiced medicine for nearly 20 years in Italy, which is kind of a remarkable story for a Black woman at that time. And then Robert Morris went on. He became one of the first Black lawyers in the country. He worked on several really important equal school rights cases like Roberts versus Boston, which I mentioned. And later he was commissioned as a magistrate of Essex County. And therefore he became the second Black lawyer to hold a judicial post in the country, which is kind of amazing. So very accomplished, both of them.
Well, and Dan, doesn't it underline how important it is to make sure that people have the right and the resources to get a really good education? But look what people can pick up and run with and accomplish when we facilitate that for everyone universally. So that's an inspiring aspect of the story that your exhibit tells as well. Well, Dan, I'm sure you've had occasion to reflect on this, working on this exhibit as hard as you have, but why is it important for all of us to go see this exhibit and learn this history? What does it change, in your view, about our understanding of education, of activism, and perhaps most significantly, whose voices make history?
Well, I think, as you've kind of alluded to or mentioned, American history, whether we think about it nationally or locally, is not only the story of, these so-called great white men. It's regular people like you and me from all kinds of different communities have accomplished and can accomplish meaningful things. There are so many stories and so many people that are worth celebrating in our history that we haven't taken the time to do so, and we should. I think, as we've talked about, the struggles for equal rights and equity, whether knowledge or otherwise, are not done. I think it helps us realize that our time, as difficult and as disheartening as it sometimes seems, it's not necessarily the worst time in history. There have been other points of time where there have been struggles and difficult situations and circumstances in society, and we can take heart in what we see in a story like this, where changes for the better can be made, that their victories have been won, and that we can learn from them and learn how to pursue those kinds of goals in our own time.
And that's certainly a significant impact that the exhibit can have on people who go to see it and learn more about this important chapter in our history and in our regional history that has not been as well known as it could be. And so thank you, and Kabria and Peabody Essex for devoting your time and effort and creativity to this exhibit, Dan, because it's part of the whole kind of burgeoning field of public history that I know Kabria is very involved in, and that Peabody Essex is also clearly engaged in. So I thank you for that. Well, and importantly now, as we end, Dan, please tell us how can people get more information about the exhibit and how long will it be on display at Peabody Essex?
Well, folks can get more information, of course, by going to the Peabody Essex Museum's website, PEM.org. If you go to PEM.org/letnone, LETNONE, you can find digitized copies of all the documents in the exhibition, plus, the exhibition materials like the texts and transcriptions of the documents, installation photographs, etc. So that's actually available online. So if you can't make it to Salem, you can experience it virtually. The exhibition will be on at least through April of 2023. We're actually talking about extending it a little bit more. But for now, it'll close in late April of 2023. So I really hope folks have an opportunity to come in and learn about this really fascinating and I think really important and essential aspect of Salem's history and of Massachusetts history.
Absolutely. It's something for Salem to be proud of.
Yes.
And Massachusettsans. What do we call ourselves, Dan?
I don't know. I don't know. I should look that up. Let's go to Wikipedia and find out.
We will. We'll all go to Wikipedia and look it up. Now, it may not be fair to ask this, but I think curators are like authors. By the time your exhibit is actually out and on view for the public, you're already working ahead on something else. Is it fair to ask any hints about what else you might be working on at this point?
Well, it is fair. Whether or not these things actually come to pass is a whole other question. So you can't hold me to it.
Like an author's next book.
Right. Yeah. So we're thinking about an exhibition on the cod trade between the North Shore and Bilbao, Spain. And I'm also considering an exhibition to coincide with the Revolutionary Anniversary year. We have two early copies of the Declaration of Independence, one that was printed in Boston and one that was printed in Salem, both in July, maybe 12th to 15th. We're not quite sure what the dates are, 1776. As the word of the Declaration spread from Philadelphia, printers in various cities would print essentially broadsides that spelled out the Declaration, and they're very, very ephemeral, and very few of them exist. And so luckily we've got two copies. So we might build an exhibition around that for 2025, 2026.
Well, those both sound like fascinating topics, Dan, and I wish you luck with both of them. And you can come back and talk about them. All right. It's a deal.
Sounds good.
Standing invitation. Thank you so much again, Dan. It sounds like a wonderful exhibit and such an important and inspiring story. We appreciate it. You take care now.
Thanks, Mary. You too.
And now I'm so happy to welcome my next guests, who are going to be here to talk to us about Newburyport Adult and Community Education's plans to offer summer camp for grown-ups. And doesn't that sound appealing? So Vicki Hendrickson is here. She's been the director and was the founder of Newburyport Adult and Community Education. Vicki, welcome. Thanks so much for coming to the show.
Thank you, Mary. It's so nice to be here.
It's nice to have you here. It always is. And I'm also happy to welcome Patti St, who is currently the Assistant Director of Newburyport Adult and Community Education and will be taking over as director. And congratulations on that, Patti. Welcome, and thank you so much for coming to visit the morning show.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Well, my pleasure to have you.
She's a great person to take over.
Wonderful.
I've known Patti a long, long time, and she's just the perfect person to take on this task.
Well, I'm really happy to hear that, and I have no doubts in it.
Yeah,
so,
me either.
Well, I'm sure people are eager to hear about Summer Camp for Grown-ups, which, by the way, is a great title. So,
thank you.
And it's quite an interesting and varied lineup, I noticed. So let's talk about people's options for camp this summer. Maybe we should start. I have a list of the classes here. I see speak Spanish from day one. So who would like to talk about that?
Well, Patti, do you want to talk about that, or do you want me to?
I will let you start, Vicki.
Okay. All right. So the Spanish classes, we have two Spanish classes, and they're taught by Ari Fagan. Did I pronounce it right, Patti?
Arlie.
Arlie. Arlie Fagan. She is a middle school, 6th grade Spanish teacher. She's from Mexico. She's so enthusiastic. She's just terrific. And she took over the spring classes for us, and the spring advanced or intermediate class. And so she's going to do both this summer. They won't start until August. So the first week of August is when she's going to start those, because she's going to Mexico for the part of the summer. Yeah.
Better
she'll
yet.
practice her Spanish there.
Yes, you'll give people chances.
Yeah, get
to
that
sign up
accent down. Right. That's it.
That's right.
That's it, babe. Yeah.
Start
So
watching.
she'll be coming, and I'm not sure that we firmed up the location yet, but I mean, that'll happen soon.
Wonderful.
And then moving to English, we have, we're not going to have ESL this summer. We just, it's just too complicated. But if somebody really is interested, if they'll call me, and the number is 978-361-6008, and maybe we can put that up. We can find, like a tutor for 1 or 2 people. But anyway, the writing classes are Jumpstart Your Memoir, which is with a Zoom class that will be with Andrea Cleghorn. And she is so popular. Sometimes we have to just go to 2 classes for her because everybody wants to jumpstart their memoir, and you can do it this summer in 4 weeks.
Excellent.
But yeah, and she gives good prompts, and she's just a great teacher.
Sounds great.
And then Zara Robb is going to teach how to raise a poem, which I have taken myself, and it's wonderful. You can do any kind of poetry. It doesn't have to be formalist poetry. It could be narrative poetry or prose poems or, free verse, whatever you want to do. But in the summer, your brain kind of goes into a poetic state.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, I think so. So while it's there, use it, right?
Absolutely.
Sign up for a poetry class.
Raise that poem while you can.
Yeah,
And that's a great,
write that poem while you got a poetic brain.
That's right. Sounds good.
Then Elizabeth Barrett is going to have a 4-week class of the Writer's Workshop, which I've also taken. And she's a wonderful writer and editor herself. And the class is very popular. So the writing classes will fill up pretty quickly. So if you're interested, if someone's interested, they should get on the phone or get online and fill it up.
Sign up now while you have the
Sign
chance.
up now. That's it.
Well, those sound wonderful. They all sound wonderful, Vicki.
Thank you, Mary.
But you have some other classes too, because it's really diverse. And I'm curious to hear more about forest bathing, because that's such an attention-getting title. So let's talk a little bit about that.
All righty. Yes, it is an attention-getting title for sure, because it basically sold out within 10 days. I know.
But will be offered again.
Oh, absolutely.
Well,
definitely in the
so,
fall. Yes,
right.
definitely in the fall. There's 2 new classes, and that is one of them. So it's very interesting. And the woman actually reached out to us. There's that and fungi exploration, which I'm always looking for teachers. But it's actually a very interesting concept. It originated in Japan, and basically it's their cornerstone of health and wellness. And we'll be taking a walk through the woods, and it's a time for reflection and meditation and peacefulness, and just a way to, it's good for your emotional and physical health, really, and your heart rate. So it's really becoming popular. You might have heard of it. I know prior to COVID, it really was very, very popular. So we're very pleased to do that. And again, she found us. So honestly, Vicki and I weren't really sure, because we'll just try out anything usually. And I'm still learning the ropes, of course, but we both, I think, were very surprised that boom, just like that, it sold out. So so we're looking forward to that.
You're wonderful. And you mentioned in passing the fungi class. Would you say
we've got some slots left in that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So do you want to talk about that, Patty?
Sure. There's a woman from Essex 4A's. She also reached out to us, and that will be sort of exploring all the fungi that we have in Moseley Woods. Both of those, forest bathing and that, will be held in Moseley Woods. And it's sort of just its entire world of its own, and no matter where you walk. So she will be taking everyone on that journey. And whoever wants to attend, bring along a basket, because there are some edibles, and she recommends that. So, you know, she will help to distinguish the ones that are poisonous, the ones that are not, and what are the things that are, you know, special to our area. So it's just really interesting. There's a little bit of science, a little bit of nature, and it's summertime. So it's a little lighthearted, but a nice way to communicate and commune, if you will, with both nature and people, to be connected with them as you stroll through the forest. So looking forward to those too.
That sounds fascinating, and also how important to learn which ones are safe to eat and which ones are not.
Yeah, exactly.
Indeed, I know. I'm not exactly. And so for me, none of them are edible. That's what I say.
Kind of like
None of them are edible.
Safest policy, but then you hear people scream over how delicious. I think there's a mushroom called chicken of the woods. So anyway, those both sound really interesting, and a way to get to avail yourself of the healing power of nature in different ways.
Right.
Exactly.
Well,
right.
I'll talk a little bit about Dyke Hendrickson's 2 classes.
Yes, that'd be great.
I mean, I know him fairly well, so yeah. He's a pal.
You're familiar with his work.
He's got 2 books. He's just walked in the door. He has 2 books that he's still giving lectures on, The Amazing Merrimack, and also Plum Island, A Vulnerable Gem. Plum Island, that book hasn't arrived in the United States yet. It's still making its way from England, but someday it'll get here. But he does present a wonderful slideshow and commentary on both of those books, and they're very popular. That it lasts about an hour and a half, and it's Zoom. It's a Zoom class, so you don't have to go anywhere. You just can sit down and watch it, and there's plenty of time for questions and answers. And as you know, the river in particular is starting to get dirty again. I mean, you know, the Clean Water Act did a great job for it, for cleaning it all up, all the rivers in the United States, but that has kind of lost its momentum. And so I think that there needs to be a lot of attention paid to those, to both Plum Island and the Merrimack, because, you know, they're central to our lives here.
They absolutely are, and they're beautiful, and anybody who lives around here is very invested in it,
exactly,
interested in them. So that sounds great. But that's not the end of summer camp for grown-ups. There's more.
There's more.
Yeah. Patty, do you want to talk about the bridge class?
Sure, Vicki, you can dive in. As mentioned, I'm feeling new here. I'm just going to admit, for 6 months, not even that, maybe 4. So I'm still just learning the teachers and classes, but bridge has become popular too. Again, another one. It's just a really fun hobby, and younger folks really learning it too, which is interesting. And just in terms of I don't know how to play it myself, so I'd love to be a little, you know, fly on the wall for that and really learn. But I like to say that it's kind of like life, because what I understand is that when you play the game, it's really about skill. It's not really the hands that you're dealt, but how you play them. So apparently, I know, I know, like any card game, but you know, they build it that. So I'm like, okay, it just has a nice little ring to it, right?
It does. It does.
Right.
You still have to. It's use skill. I mean, like chess, right? It's not really. It's not rummy. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And Sally McKay has been teaching that for a bit, and she actually does it at her home. There's a limit of 8 because she really likes to give attention to that.
Well, it's 2 tables. It makes for 2 tables, which is you really need 2 tables.
Right. So
I think when I went to college, that's where I learned how to play from my mother, and of course we all played in college. And so the first year after my freshman year, she said, "Well, did you learn anything besides bridge, or was that the whole of your educational effort?"
Well,
but bridge can be pretty compelling. I mean, I should have had your line, Patty, that said, "Life is bridge, mother." Don't you know that?
That's right. It's a
strategy.
What are you thinking?
Well, you also have some fitness and strength building classes with the amazing Eunice James.
Isn't she fabulous? She is just wonderful.
So I think that she's doing a couple of them, isn't she?
She is, yeah. She's doing kettlebells, which is especially good for older people such as myself, because you need all this strength. I mean, I walk with a cane now because of all these hip problems I've had, but I find the stronger I am, the better I do. And so she does senior stretching, which I've also taken, which is very good, excellent. And I've taken kettlebells too. Now, I can't quite do this. She can do a lot of kettlebell weight.
I'm sure
I can't quite do that, but she's a wonderful teacher.
Yes,
and
she is.
Anybody who takes a class from her will love her because she's just terrific.
I've taken a class with her, and I will second that.
She's great.
A great person, great teacher, and a great personality.
Yeah.
But that's not all. There's another one we haven't talked about yet, but I'm sure people will be engaged by. And it has the great title, Stars in Your Eyes. Beginning tarot. And so you have to tell us about that. One of you has to tell us about that.
Well, that's going to be at my house.
Okay.
And Janet Johnston must be the smartest woman on the planet. That's all I can say. Because she's a solar physicist at MIT. Okay, so there you go. That's one thing. All right. Then she teaches Romanian dancing or belly dancing. She creates her own costumes. She's a science fiction writer.
Wow.
She sings opera and she does tarot cards.
Nice.
Okay.
I mean, just from one, what doesn't she do? I can't think.
Well, it gives new life to the concept of a Renaissance woman, right?
Incredible. She's just incredible. And she's been with adult ed since the very beginning. Since the first, I did have a belly dancing teacher when we were at the high school who wanted to teach belly dancing. And, there are a lot of shawls and thin fabric and all of that. It's a great workout. And I did take it once. I wasn't very good at it, but I did take it. And so she wanted to bring candles in to subdue the mood. And I thought, this is the brand new high school. You want to bring candles in? So if the bands don't catch fire, the things don't catch fire, then the sprinkler system will turn on and ruin the floor. That's a great idea. So I heard about Janet and I thought, I think we'll switch over. And so Janet was more pragmatic.
Okay.
So that worked out. But I've taken the tarot class 2 or 3 times and it's just fun, it doesn't mean you have to swear by it. You don't, you don't join the tarot association. You just do it. It's fun. Have you ever taken it, Patti, or had any tarot reading or anything like that?
Yes, I have. Like 20 years ago, I had a friend who was very curious about that. So we would do it. It's interesting. It's fascinating. It's like astrology. I find it very, very interesting, but I take it with a grain of salt, of course.
Well, I think that there's so many elements of how things happen. Who knows?
Who knows?
Yeah, exactly.
But it's always fun to find
it is
a new model and a different way of thinking. It's just fun to play around with.
Yeah.
And so, gosh, summer camp for grown-ups covers all the bases. It sounds fantastic. And I think
it's going to be. So we encourage everybody to sign right up, because who wants to have the whole summer go by when you don't learn a darn thing?
No one.
You can't allow yourself to not learn something.
And it's
another great class too. Another one that I do want to add as well is genealogy.
Yes, genealogy.
That's a wonderful class. Lisa Powers teaches that, and I think she does it every session. Vicki, does she?
Yeah, she does. Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad you remembered that. Yeah, that's great. Yeah,
very,
she's
very
terrific.
popular. So it's who doesn't want to learn about their roots, right? Who knows
th-
what's in that
it's-
history, your family tree, and are you descended from royalty or bank robbers? So who knows what it
Or
could be.
sometimes they overlap.
Probably both.
Oh, this is true. Good point. Oh my gosh, good point. This is true.
And I think people have only grown more interested with things like Ancestry.com and 23andMe and the DNA. So I'm sure you'll have people.
Yeah, there's some great stories. 23andMe
yeah.
stories. Wow.
Absolutely. So that's
Well, I think we've covered the bases now.
I
Have
think
left
we
anything
did.
out? Well, it
Mary,
sounds-
thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. It's wonderful to have you on, and you gave wonderful and vivid descriptions of the summer camp for grown-ups. So, Vicki, thank you for coming. Always good to see you. Patty, good to
Always
meet
good to
you.
see you.
you as well.
And-
Mary. Thank you. Hope to see you again and talk to you again as well.
I'm sure we will. And,
Great.
and congrats again on
Thank
becoming director. I think in January, that's when that will happen.
Yes,
Oh,
Vicky's
that's
going to
wonderful.
Vicky's going to pass the cane, as it were.
Okay.
She'll be passing the cane.
Maybe
Yeah.
we'll have a Chamber of Commerce ribbon cutting.
Yeah. Well,
There you go.
I want to have a mixer. I was entrenched in that, so it's a good thing. After that, I went and I was doing a little bit more different work and whatnot, fundraisers
Okay,
of marketing,
great.
etc. But I do want to do that. This is different. I have thoughts and ideas, but we'll see. Good.
Wonderful.
Vicky lives up the road across the street, so.
Okay.
Yeah, not too far.
Well, thank
All
you
right.
both. It's
Bye,
been
Mary.
wonderful
Thank
to
you.
have
Have a wonderful summer.
You have a wonderful
Thank you, Mary.
summer too. Bye now.
Bye
Bye-bye.
now.
Bye-bye.